just one point on that. Of course, TP doesn't mandate a control protocol, but you're allowed to use one. And yes, the one that people are looking at is GMPLS based, but you know, we heard the talk just before from Thomas.
Yeah, but I think when it goes into the access, nobody's thinking about GMPLS to the access probably, because you mentioned the cost and that there is some other areas, but it is feasible. But at this point in time, in terms of security, just to highlight this point.
But they might consider LDP for signaling, for setup of a pseudowire across the TP infrastructure.
Yeah, I personally think that, you know, no matter you use TP or MPLS, for seamless MPLS, from my perspective, may not make much of a difference. Because I think that one of the big difference, people talk about TP and MPLS, is that, oh, in TP, maybe I don't use a dynamic control plane. But if you don't use a dynamic control plane, then, you know, the benefit of like have this end-to-end signaling kind of go away. So to some extent, for TP, you cannot have both. You know, you cannot say that on the one hand, you know, I make it very simple, and on the other, I also want to get the benefit.
Yeah, but that goes back to the earlier point, which I was saying, that are we just, you know, juggling balls and shifting the complexity to the provisioning system, especially when you take it all to the access and you have 10,000 devices now that need to know, even if they do LDP downstream on demand signaling, I mean, you still got to go provision that.
But I think that's a general battle between TP and MPLS. Is there a control plane good or is it evil? And let's come back to the interoperational topic. I really see the requirements that we get more support also from the industry. I think 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that was the time was very simple. There was CISCO, and CISCO implemented text switching. And then there was additional vendors for that. And I think it was a hard work to do interoperability. We did, as a service provider, did a lot of work in lab testing and in the IETF and so on. And I think this does not work today with our access nodes, with multiple access nodes, different vendors, and most of the vendors are focusing on the DSL part or the GPON part. And I would expect many of them buy some software to implement it on the access nodes. They don't implement the software by itself. And I would expect that we need some support from the industry, from forum or something else, to get one implementation statement, what is the functionality of the access node, to attach it to the network, to provide a small set or the minimum set of MPLS capabilities to have really the seamless MPLS to be running.
That's fantastic input. I think that's something that the
want to mention that
ecosystem needs to know.
MPLS TP, I mean, is evil or not evil? It depends. It needs to be really. I don't think so. I think that there are multiple operators, and that technology exists and is required for specific applications. It might not be applied for your network for backhauling traffic from these lamps, and I agree with that. I mean, I have no issue with that. But I think it does exist in other areas. And just doing talking with some analysts, what I found interesting is that over the next 3 years, we are seeing, in terms of the packet technologies being used at the access, there's going to be 30% of IP MPLS, 30% of MPLS TP, and 30% about Ethernet. Talking about, for example, a lot of these LANs, but there are other access networks that we have, for example, microwave-based networks for backhauling mobile traffic. And in this case today, that's Ethernet, and will remain Ethernet for a while. So I think just we need to see that there are many type of operators, many type of applications, and we shouldn't just think about one single solution fits all for the moment.
I think also we need to open up again this whole discussion about IP MPLS and MPLS TP, and it started from TMPLS.
No, I don't want to focus on MPLS TP here because we are looking at end-to-end MPLS.
No, because IP MPLS as a technology was proven, which means there is no doubt. It's just a more political way to approach transport people that really don't understand the IP protocol. This is really the truth behind the whole thing, because eventually if you're stripping out the whole signaling, as you said, if you're stripping the whole good things from IP MPLS, you just need those NMS tools like in Sonnet SDH to make it really transport-oriented. So
I think those tools are exactly what many of the operators who've been developing these for 100 years already, they want to drop in this new technology and make it look just like what they had before. And so they feel really good about that. And if it lets us leverage MPLS, why not?
think, I mean, you're right. It's not just about the fact that they don't know IP. I think it is emerging primarily from the transport domain and optical domain, and in this area we are more specific in terms of connection-oriented environment. And, well, that's why TP was built for that. Now, it doesn't mean that it's a solution for everything, and so that's just putting that into perspective. That's important.
We talked about, say, the complexity of moving all the provisioning out into the access, but really then, I mean, what alternative are we talking about, right? Even carrier Ethernet requires provisioning. ELAN provisioning is a relatively involved task as well.
You know, it's interesting. There's a lot of tools which have been developed for Ethernet that no one really uses, like GVRP and ELMI and these things. These things are there. And I don't know, maybe we should ask the operators, why are they not being used? Apparently, you can get along without them.
But I would expect then we would use Ethernet in 15 years because it's there and nobody has implemented something else.
And we are mixing again IP, MPLS, MPLS TP, and if we do MPLS TP in the access and have IP MPLS in the core, so we don't gain anything. We don't have this MPLS transport throughout the network. So it's like who was doing the presentation, the Italian from Italian
Telecom Italia.
They're stitching together MPLS TP, then IP MPLS, then MPLS TP again, with going up to the UNI and then back again, going to Ethernet and then back again to MPLS. I mean, from our perspective, you don't gain so much when you do that.
But I think that's a difference between the large and a smaller operator, because you have an integrated operations team, they may not. And also there's still benefit, I mean, they're getting some benefit by at least having a uniform technology, even if they have to stitch it, which it must be worth something, otherwise there would be no incentive for them to do that.
I actually would also like to put that question back again. Didn't GVRP had to be reinvented as MVRP because that protocol wouldn't scale, right? And now, even with MVRP, why isn't it that, say, it's not very popular in operator networks? So is it just a matter of evangelizing it a little bit more, or maybe coaching more people about it, or is there anything else fundamentally wrong with the protocol itself?
I think the fundamental issue is where the root of the tree has to be. And a lot of people didn't like that model for their networks.
Actually, getting back to the internet, which is like the whole ingredients of the right provisioning. So MEF right now going through NMS, AMS working group, and eventually if it will be standard for all those relevant services and also performance measurement, and will be standard MIB that will be used by others, eventually it seems to be that some points will go to Ethernet on the access. And this is something, again, from the point of view of MEF, is getting priority for the upcoming 1.5 years. So when looking on the timeline and what will catch up, as of now, don't see right now any option, because most of the vendors using their own proprietary MIBs, and this is not really working with others.
That's the problem, yeah. So any questions from the audience?